standing beyond a field of ominous and dark, yet despairingly beautiful flowers. The ruins loom in silent decay. There, amid a patch of black petals, a familiar figure lies, motionless. A young woman, her body still, her breath stolen by the night. A pool of crimson seeps into the earth, staining the once vibrant grass. You were too late. The life you swore to protect now lies before you, lost.
彼女の守護者を気取るとは、片払いたい。
Virche Evermore Error Salvation's Act 3, or La Salut, alongside Ceres, who is our female lead, follows two characters, Ankou and Adolphe. This is quite unique given how other routes have opted in for the one male lead standard. But what makes La Salut so special to have chosen to go the seemingly unconventional path? Could it potentially be that these two characters are intertwined? La Salut is the final act in Virche Evermore, the thematic conclusion that ties in all the mysteries and unexplainable occurrences happening in Arpechelle, uncovering the mastermind behind the deaths, ploys, and the curse that ravages the land. La Salut, in addition, also uncovers an underlying narrative that we take for granted, mainly the identity of the Watchman of Death and the story of Adolphe. While we can't explore every facet of the route, we'll take a deeper look into the two characters, Adolphe and Ankou. The older foster brother of Ceres, Adolphe is the Corps' leader, a man who is 21 years old. Unlike many characters in Virche who inhibit symptoms of the curse as early as 21 years old, Adolphe has been depicted to have a strong body and, nearing the end of his lifespan, has yet to show any symptoms. It makes you wonder, how is this the case? The answer is quite simple, but before we can get to that, we have to understand Adolphe's character and his motivations. Given the context of Virche and the scapegoating of Ceres as the harborer of death, her very existence is held in contempt by society, with conspiracies and tragic coincidences that inevitably put her in an unfavorable light. Everywhere she goes, misfortune comes along and destroys everything that is precious to her and the people around her. Given such coincidences and the relentless antagonization, Ceres herself starts to believe she truly is death incarnate, harboring so much self-loathing it's almost masochistic. The only two characters up to this point that had ever given her a chance and defended her honor to the core were Sister Salome and Adolphe. Adolphe is that dependable older brother, one that loves Ceres and defends her, never once budging to the crowd that's blinded by desperation and ignorance. Adolphe detests the way in which Arpechellian society is quick to baselessly blame and often critiques the nature of those who live there. And while many of his criticisms apply mostly to the imperfect nature of relivers and how they're designed, even non-relivers are prone to such attitudes. It's not much of a stretch to understand why Adolphe is vehemently against this type of behavior. Imagine if someone you hold dear is in Ceres' position, to be condemned by society based on nothing more than superstition and lack of evidence. However, it goes further beyond the desire to protect. It's also rooted in an extreme distrust of people. Throughout every route, Adolphe's skepticism and selectiveness in trusting others becomes apparent. His animosity is laid bare in moments like this.
黙れ。死者に手を合わせることも悲しむこともせず、開口一番に出るのが、若い娘一人への罵倒かよ。昔からとことん変わらねえな。この国の人間の性根は。
It's a social critique of the attitudes of Arpechelle, where people are so desensitized to death they barely feel any sorrow for the victims, and rather substitute due process with scapegoating, masquerading their discontent as sympathy. Adolphe's predicament is fascinating. His love and protectiveness for Ceres, his deep mistrust and his disillusionment with society paints a compelling picture that leads me to inquire more. When you progress through La Salut, we get a better understanding of his motivations. What motivates Adolphe is simply being able to protect and pursue Ceres. Eventually, we uncover that this familial love he has for Ceres evolves into an unrequited love for his foster sister. But the thing about that is, Adolphe, despite his desire to protect her, always ends in frustration. Whether it's sheltering Ceres from antagonization in his own home, failing to shield her from Barreau or frenzied mobs, or being unable to protect her without the intervention of Ankou, he is always a step too late. It's maddening. All these events absolutely frustrated me to my core. It was as if the entire world was conspiring against them, against his pure and often tainted desire to protect.
セレス！くそ！なんで！俺は、お前を守ることがいつもできないんだ！
Despite being one of the most skilled warriors in Arpechelle, strong enough to lead the corps, resilient to the curse even at an age where it should have taken its toll, and unwavering in his oath to Ceres, why has the world forsaken him? In a land full of what is inhuman, why does he not have what is inhuman, necessary to fully protect the one he loves? As Ankou puts it, a useless man disguised as a protector, a man so powerless, unfit to protect anyone. That is frustrating. It's demoralizing. Watching a character that tries so hard yet can never truly achieve what is within reach. I think that's what Virche ultimately aims to portray with Adolphe. Someone who is too powerless. A narrative arc that makes readers frustrated, demoralized, and without hope. Adolphe's arc is one of unrelenting struggle. The world seems to be conspiring against him, stripping him of all control. But why? What sets him apart? A pivotal moment in Salut offers clarity. When Devoid approaches Adolphe and asks why he doesn't want to become a reliver, his response was unexpected and also very simple.
恐ろしいだろ。未知の技術に自分の命を預けるなんて。何ですかそれ。めちゃくちゃ。普通な理由じゃないですか。いいんじゃないですか。一人くらいは、そんな、普通の人間がいても。
The truth was under our noses the entire time. Drifting across the seas and landing on the shores of Arpechelle, Salome finds a boy, stranded and abandoned, one who came not from Arpechelle, but from the outside world. This was the second drifter, and his name is Adolphe. Born to a wealthy family in a faraway land, despite what this could entail, did not live an extravagant lifestyle. In fact, Adolphe's parents were child traffickers, having children and putting them up for auction to be sold like commodities. His siblings were bought and sold for profit, his parents lavishing in what they did. However, Adolphe in particular was held in contempt by his own parents. He was never desired enough in order to be bought by someone else, leading to his parents seeing him as a worthless commodity, unbefitting of love nor monetary value. Eventually, his parents opted to abandon him entirely, throwing him into the ocean to die a slow and lonely death. As Adolphe drifts away deeper into the sea, he pleads that he can live, pleads to not be alone, to be loved and cherished, something he was never given the luxury of in his young life, a life that was treated as commodity, a commodity that was undesired, and a child that was undeserving of love and left to be abandoned. Adolphe's early life is melancholic. When we think back to why Adolphe holds humanity in contempt, perhaps we can look back to his upbringing and the way he was treated. In a world where even his biological parents treated him like livestock, what kind of impression would you think he would have of the world, and much less a country like Arpechelle, that takes death for granted? Furthermore, given Arpechelle's unique circumstances with the curse that limits everyone's lifespan to 23 years, it's a country that is thirsty and desperate for answers, desperate for a cure, even to the point where it would go to great lengths, including human experimentation. When you put yourself into the shoes of Adolphe, growing up in Arpechelle, you see firsthand what the curse and by extension, the reliance on reliable technology has created, a populace that doesn't live their lives to the fullest, taking for granted and diminishing the value of both life and death. Coupled with the power-hungry monarchy and morally grey leading scientists playing God, Adolphe understands that being a normal human, he is in a lot of danger. This impeding doom will lead him to suffer unexplainable pain and inhuman experimentation, a fate far worse than death. But Adolphe's story doesn't end there. Faced with the heavy burden, knowing that he is the second drifter and the only normal living human on the island, he is forced to live in secrecy, falsifying his age and living under a facade. Adolphe has to reconcile with the fact that, in order to live a normal life in the eyes of Arpechelle, he must act in self-preservation, doing whatever he can in order to avoid unwanted attention in the twisted nation that views death as non-existent and life as expendable. Truly now do we see just how lonely of a person Adolphe is. He is someone who has difficulty trusting people, someone who must hold a secret even from those he loves. He is someone who desires to protect people, yet cannot utilize his full potential in order to protect himself. He is by all standards condemned to live a lonely life, a life in hiding, a life of secrecy, secrets that must be taken to his grave. And yet, we can't stop there. As we delve deeper into Adolphe's isolation and contempt for society, we see a man trapped by his own beliefs. A man who is certain that, like everyone else in Arpechelle, he will die at the age of 23, claimed by the curse. Given the world that he inhabits, it's an understandable assumption. If the land itself is cursed, wouldn't that fate extend to all those who walk upon it? Caught between self-preservation, his duty to protect Ceres, and the looming specter of the curse, Adolphe resigns himself to powerlessness. He does not fight to prove Ceres' innocence. Instead, he accepts what he believes to be his inevitable death, choosing to conceal his identity rather than challenge the world around him. He does only the bare minimum, shielding Ceres from harm while, in secret, preparing for his own end, and as his 23rd birthday approaches, he braces for the moment his life will be cut short. But then, the unthinkable happens. He survives. The day that should have marked his demise passes, and he is still there. At that pivotal moment in Salut, Adolphe is unable to contend with the revelation that he will live beyond 23. He is not freed by his knowledge. He is shackled by it. The fragile equilibrium he maintained is now shattered, and he is forced to face the horrifying truth. All this time, he could have done more. He could have fought harder. He could have lived differently. And now, instead of an escape, he is condemned to continue, living life as a human among those who are not. His safety growing more precarious with each passing day. Overcome by despair, he reaches for his dagger, preparing to end it all. The weight of his loneliness, his regrets, and his false existence bears down upon him, and he cannot bear it much longer. But before he can follow through, Ceres enters. In that moment, something inside him snaps, not with sorrow, but with fury. For the first time, he turns on her, lashing out in desperation. He calls her what the world has always been calling her, death.
そうだ。きっと、お前のせいだ。本来なら俺は、今ここで死ぬはずだったんだ。なのに、お前のような死神が現れたから、俺の運命が、狂ったんだ。暖かな場所で眠りにつきたい。ただ、それだけのために、俺は、このおぞましい国で、他人の顔色を伺いながら必死に生きてきたのに、お前のせいで、お前さえいなければ、嫌いだ。お前なんて、俺に、こんな、醜い感情を吐き出させた、お前が、俺だけは、お前を死神なんて罵るまいと、誓っていたのに。
It was a profound way to portray the dilemma and hopelessness of Adolphe. To me, this was like watching the last desperate attempt of a man to take his own life, only then to be stopped by the person he loves. Adolphe calling Ceres death wasn't because he truly believed that she was the misfortune that Arpechelle deemed her to be, but rather because she was a harbinger of death that killed his will to take his own life. His lashing out was a call for help, a cry for salvation, away from his lonely path in hiding. But more than just a cry for help, it was him taking out the frustrations of his inaction and helplessness, with the protectorate of himself being the one to give him a new hope. but a new hope that feels the continuation of his false identity and secret he must keep. As we grapple with Adolphe's dilemma, we start to see him for who he truly is, a normal person. A person so normal that even fate condemns him from interfering with Arpechelle and Ceres. In the context of Arpechelle and its extreme way of life, everyone is abnormal. Morality is gray, the constitutionality of life is debatable, and the ploys that haunt the island are unimaginable. It is an island of demons, an island set far apart from the outside world. How can we expect someone like Adolphe, the second ever drifter, a normal human from the outside world, to contest with the fate that Arpechelle has condemned it to? While normalcy is what Arpechelle desires, normalcy is what cannot survive in Arpechelle. It is not a coincidence that the first drifter went into hiding. It is not surprising for Adolphe, the second drifter, to do the same. And it isn't unimaginable why the world works against everything he does in order to protect Ceres, for it all to end in vain. Has God forsaken him, Ceres and Arpechelle? What about the Watchman of Death? What is his role in all of this? It's simple. His role is to uncover the deaths that have happened and will happen in contract with Ceres. The only caveat is that his true mission is to save her. And it's a mission we all know too well. The scene at the beginning of Salut, where Adolphe cradles Ceres' lifeless body, mirrors a moment from Act 2, a moment that should have ended the same way, yet it did not. In Act 2, we see events unfold from Ceres' perspective. Overwhelmed by despair, she presses a blade to her throat, ready to end everything. But before she can go through with it, somebody stops her. A man grips the blade with his bare hands, staining the steel with his own blood. And that man is Ankou, or rather, the Adolphe who has already lost Ceres once before, who has returned to rewrite fate. Ankou, the Watchman of Death, is the entity tasked with observing death, symbolically in reference to Ceres. But when does an observer become a participant? When does a man doomed to failure try to change fate? Salut answers that question through Ankou. He is the Adolphe who, after failing to protect Ceres, is given another chance. Salut intertwines these two characters for that same reason. Adolphe, the powerless protector, and Ankou, the undying observer. Two existences intertwined across time, mirroring each other in a cycle of regret, love, and futility. I've seen a couple of stories that have delved into this type of narrative device before. The coincidence and exploration of a character in two different stages of their lives. Every time it happens, it's unique and always gets me on the edge of my seat. But how did this happen? How was Ankou, or Adolphe, able to revert back in time? For this, we'll have to look into the timeline to where he failed to save Ceres. At the time of Ceres' death, the curse that ravaged Arpechelle actually limited the lifespan to only 18 years old. Following the passing of Ceres, Adolphe was angered, sad, and vengeful. His identity as the second drifter has brought the spotlight onto him, and all his worst fears were brought to light. Under the leadership of CM Rofiwase, he was subjected to excruciating and torturous experimentation with the goal to replicate Adolphe's pure human genes to facilitate a way to combat the curse. However, his body had changed so much that he had artificially gained the power of immortality, allowing himself to regenerate and effectively become immortal. For someone so human and so normal, in a land forsaken by God, the island to which was inhabited by demons and those inhuman, he himself was far worse. He had become a monster, no longer human nor truly saved. For someone who had dreaded the very loneliness he felt when he was in hiding, he now has to contest with the reality that he is the only person with true immortality, a person whose fate is eternal suffering. And yet, his love for Ceres still remained, and upon discovery of a new technology able to revert back time in a foreign land, Adolphe's mission was to travel back in time in order to save Ceres, even if it meant being no longer human nor ever truly seeing the fruits of his love flourish. All he wanted was to see Ceres live as a normal girl, free from the shackles of the curse and society that condemned her. It's a noble, yet naive wish, but a journey Adolphe was willing to embark on for the girl he dearly cherished. He escaped Arpechelle, traveling back centuries before the events of Virche Evermore. It was then that he uncovered the truth. The curse was woven into the very fabric of the land, its roots buried deep within the soil, As the years passed and time left its mark upon him, he encountered the first drifter, whom revealed the secret of the licorice flower, its uncanny ability to absorb and purify the omen that tainted the earth. It was here, in the quiet understanding between them, that a pact was formed. The drifter vowed to protect, cultivate, and spread the licorice noir, ensuring its reach would one day cleanse the land, and as a sign of his new identity, the drifter gave Adolphe a new name, one that would become both a title and a fate: Ankou. Because of his efforts, Ankou was able to raise the lifespan of Arpechelle from 18 years to 23 years, but that still wouldn't be enough to save his dear Ceres. He had to think of a way in which he is able to truly cure her and Arpechelle to be freed from this curse. Part of that was to create antibodies and build resilience to the curse, to which can be made into a medicine. Given that the licorice sucked up toxins from the soil, it was perfect. Ankou would create antibodies out of his own blood by consuming the licorice flowers planted by the Noir's lineage. But as much as this process sounds straightforward and great, it was a deeply tumultuous time for Ankou. Eating the licorice flowers were painful, the toxins are potent, and enough to instantly kill a human being. But for Ankou, since he is effectively immortal, survives, but goes through excruciating pain, all for the sliver of hope that he's able to save Ceres. He does this not for a day, nor weeks, nor years, nor decades, but centuries. Centuries before the birth of his beloved. He endures the pain, consuming the flowers of misfortune, and ultimately suffers alone in this purgatory. What good was having immortality if it only brought him endless pain? To have a part of you destroyed, repaired, then destroyed again, in a cycle of despair. In a scene that plays, I remember vividly the agonizing screams of Ankou. It was laced with both despair and deep yearning. Ankou's story is a narrative about his convictions put through the test of time. At some point, he didn't want to endure the pain any longer. He didn't want to continue living if it meant that Ceres wouldn't be with him. Instead of drifting through the ocean and abandoned by his parents, it was him drifting through time with fringe hope that a miracle happens.
こんな苦痛をあと数十年以上自分から摂取しろというのか。上等だ。俺は絶対やり遂げてやる。生きているセレスに会えるなら生きているセレスに会うんだ。生きているセレスに会いたい。生きているセレスに会えない。まだセレスは生まれてこないのか。どうして俺はこんな場所で一人誰にも知られずのたうち回ってる。どうしてどうしてどうしてどうしてどうしてどうしてどうしてどうしてもう一人は嫌だ。このままここで一人痛みに焼かれ続けるぐらいなら死に逃げたい。君の生きている姿が見たいんだ。
It was a profound moment of weakness. Instead of the collected, impartial, and sometimes snarky Ankou we're used to seeing, we're left with a man kneeling on the ground, crying out for Ceres. The scene is heartbreaking, yet extremely beautiful. It showcases the fine line between Ankou's dedication and his resignation. The dedication he has to find it means in order to have Ceres live to be a normal girl, and the pain he's endured to call it quits. I loved seeing this type of portrayal. seeing a character be pushed to their limits and witnessing if their conviction yet wavers. It gives insight to the type of person Ankou, or Adolphe, really is. A person extremely dedicated to his mission, a person who's always at a crossroads between the humanity that renders him powerless as Adolphe and the inhumanity of being immortal that makes him suffer as Ankou. Both interpretations share a mutual theme of loneliness that characterizes both of them. Both interpretations produce a sense of self-loathing, where Adolphe, despite loving Ceres, thinks he is unworthy of her love nor to be called a protector, and Ankou, detesting his own self as Adolphe, who's failed to act. The tragedy of Virche Evermore Error Salvation finds its heart in the intertwined fates of Adolphe and Ankou, two sides of the same coin, forever reaching for salvation but trapped in the cruel cycle of time. Adolphe, a man bound by his humanity, powerless to protect the one he loves, is contrasted with Ankou, a being stripped of his humanity, burdened by endless suffering in his pursuit of salvation. Both embody different extremes, one too normal for the twisted world of Arpechelle, the other too inhuman to ever truly find peace. Their journey is one of sacrifice, regret, and unyielding love. Adolphe, with all his limitations, fights against a world that will never let him win. Ankou, in his desperate attempt to change fate, endures centuries of torment, only to realize that even with immortality, he remains just as helpless. Their story is not merely about defying death, but about what it means to exist in a world where the value of life is constantly challenged. Ultimately, Virche Evermore paints a haunting picture of loneliness and devotion. In the end, Adolphe and Ankou's tragedy is not just that they are unable to protect Ceres, it is that, in their attempts to do so, they lose themselves. They serve as reflections of each other, trapped in an endless pursuit of a salvation that may never come. And yet, even in the face of futility, they continue forward, because love, even in its most painful form, is a reason to endure.